Hey everyone, and welcome to my final poetry podcast for English 201B. My name is Jimmy Redmond,
And I'm Connor Redmond.
and today we'll be taking a deep dive into Christian women's Every Riven Thing. I'll be giving some background and some insight about what kind of poem this is, look closely at the way women use poetic devices like metaphor and jammin and speaker, and finally, I'll share some personal thoughts about how this poem connected with me. Connor will do the same for him, so let's get started. I gotta say, what really stood out to me within this poem is the way it repeats the line, God goes belonging to every riven thing he's made. That repetition feels almost more like a prayer or a reminder over and over that God isn't just like imperfect or the whole things, but also in what's broken.
Yeah.
And as a man of faith myself, that means something to me and Connor because it's a reminder that, even when we're struggling, when we feel fractured or not enough, He's still with us. The poem makes this beautiful point, in my opinion, that nothing is too broken for God to belong to it.
Yeah.
And that his presence alone isn't limited to a good moment or good people. It's everywhere and everything, whether it's whole or not.
So I noticed that in this poem, the word riven was used a lot. And
Yeah.
you know the definition of riven, right, Jimmy?
Yeah, to be broken apart.
Yeah, so it kind of just, since it's demonstrated a lot in this poem, and it's like usually tied to something that God does, it shows that God is in all these broken things. So no
Yeah.
matter what you do, or even if you're whole, you're still there, and God is still there. Because like he's made a means of a storm of peace. He changes a storm and brings it peace. And it also says that he's there for the man who sits alone. Even if you don't
Yeah.
need him, he's still there for you. And it kind of just like pops and shows that God is here for you no matter what. Even if you need him, even if you don't need him, he's always there and always cares about you. And it kind of just
Yeah.
brings something
Well,
to me. I don't know.
as you said earlier about like the means of storm of peace, you're also saying how it's like it's a good like figure of speech, you know. And
Yeah.
I it just relates because I think the poem's identity here it feels very like sacred. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, no, it does, and it says like that like telling us to think about the atoms in the stone. So it's like don't think about or he's God isn't there just for you and just for the humans and the bigger things in the picture. He's also worried about the atoms in the stone and also any other small things. So any small
Mhm.
problems you're dealing with in life, may er,
Yeah.
he will help you through that, even the big
Mhm.
problems. So
I definitely. I think like this is definitely what drew us to this poem or the sonnet specifically was more of a like having faith kind of like idea and God being in everything, whether it's broken or apart,
and just like
was
you said
definitely a
before,
huge hitter.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're men of Christ, and
Hmm.
we believe in God ourselves and try to get closer to Him every day.
Yeah,
But
we got faith. Yeah, we can just keep it at that.
yeah,
I definitely think this poem like hits in the genre of a sacred poem. You could also call it a spiritual reflection poem, but it has what? It has everything. It explores the ideas of like divine, like the relationship with God, from human to God, or a higher power. If you should, don't want to use God as an example from here.
yeah,
They use metaphors and meditative language. I mean, means a storm of peace. Like that's checks off metaphor. Definitely a metaphor.
yeah,
I
and
mean, it often less concerns. I feel like sacred poems often less concern rhyming, and they're more like a strict form of poetry. But this one still, I think it does a great job with, like, means a
yeah,
storm of peace, thinks of the atoms inside the stone, thinks of the man who sits alone. Like, definitely rhymes still, while keeping like strict form of religion in the
yeah,
background, and it keeps the emotional and spiritual like resonance.
yeah. Because in most poems you see today, it's all just like strict, like only about God. Doesn't worry about rhyming. Doesn't think about how it sounds. It's just
Hmm.
there, just information, and that doesn't really catch your, I guess, attention. So this one did a really good
Yeah.
job of not only choosing an interesting topic, but
Mhm.
also figuring out how to make and add rhyming words to it, and also use like interesting words like riven. Because before this, I didn't know what riven meant. But it just
Yeah.
showed that God is a part of us, no matter if we're broken or not.
Hmm. I mean, yeah, what you said, I think it just it definitely shows how it fits the sacred poem category. Like speaking about God's presence and everything, and uses like repetition, simplistic to like like wording to echo spiritual like tones.
Yeah,
Like as you said, like Riven, it does a great job of showing that repetition, like still having like, some simplicity. Because obviously Riven's a bit more complex, I'd say, for
yeah,
this poem, but it that just helps it feel like deeply personal, but as well like universal. So I feel like it can apply to
yeah,
like a lot of people, like whether because it says God, but you could really apply this to like a lot of faiths and probably a lot of beliefs.
yeah. So it's not only Christianity; it could be anything.
Catholicism, Buddha, yeah,
Yeah.
the whole works, right? Like all
Oh,
that.
yeah,
I don't know. I think it just does a really solid job wrapping like all that together in like one bundle, and I think that's just overall what caught our attention.
yeah. They made it an interesting way to learn about like God a little bit, I guess, because it just they made it rhyme. And most poems, like we said before, don't rhyme.
Yeah,
It's boring.
I'm. I mean, you can think of like Bible verses and stuff. Like, I mean, like the Bible and whatnot. It obviously it's like teaching like the Word of God, but it's not like it's rhyming. It's just a strict. I
Yeah,
mean, you also can't really say it's a poem, but it kind of like represents the same thing within like a book.
yeah, exactly.
And as well with the book, I mean, it we already talked about like how it talks about metaphors a lot. It has a lot in it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean it. Well, I mean that's one of our poetic devices actually, just metaphor in general. So we'll like lightly cover that. Our first example is means a storm of peace, and then we have whatever we got plenty of others, but it's mainly about the like paradoxical image that it like represents
Yeah,
with means a storm of peace. Reflects the overwhelming nature or spiritual experience, blah blah. And then the poem itself is really a metaphor, mainly for divinity and like how it's both near and elusive, as we were also just talking about.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
But for our other, we had speaker, and the speaker seems both like detached, wouldn't you say, and like
Yeah,
pretty involved.
because they make
It seems like they're kind of in and out.
yeah they make like references of like how God isn't really there, and then he also is there, and
Yeah,
it's
like he
kind of
has
weird.
like conflict within himself.
Yeah, like under a tree, a darker tree. So maybe that means like under a human, someone who is
Yeah.
a darker person. And then it says like, think of the man who's sitting alone. So he's there for the person who's alone, just like that what we
Mhm.
were talking about before.
Yeah, I mean it's another dual perspective, and it just like more reflects human spiritual longing and conflict with that. I'd say like within beliefs. I mean, it's like he wants it there, but he's like so conflicting with himself more
Yeah,
so.
he doesn't know if he's good enough because he thinks he's Riven, and
Yeah, it
he's
could be
too
like
good in
tons of
himself.
reasons, which I like that this poem like analyzes all of those, and it kind
Yeah.
of like it really gets you thinking. I mean, just in general.
Mm-hmm.
And then our last, our third is enjayment and form, which I want to discuss. Yeah, just like the poems, it was mainly about the punctuation. That's what really caught our eye with enjayment and form of the poem.
Yeah.
So like the poem's lines are often just like running into each other. It seems like with like not a lot of clear punctuation whatsoever.
No.
Like God goes, comma, belonging to every riven thing. Period. He's made. And then it just instantly goes to the next line. That's
Yeah.
very. It just continues on, which I mean, for me, it kind of reflects how the continuation of God's presence and the seamless connection between creator and created. Sorry, creation and creator, and that was kind of like the bridge for me. I don't know if you saw that, but
Yeah. No, I saw it definitely, and it's kind of
mhm.
weird how they make these really short like sentences. Like God goes belonging. That's one sentence, and it's just weird.
Yeah,
And then they have
yeah, I
these
know.
words
Mhm.
where it just like goes from he's made. It just ends there. What does it mean he's made? You
Yeah, it's
know?
awkward punctuation. It's very awkward, I'd say. And I mean,
Yeah.
speaking of God goes and like he's made, the repeated line itself, God goes belonging to every thing he's
Yeah.
made, it acts very much like a refrain in like a prayer or chant. Like
Yeah,
that's
cuz
how I kind of saw it because it definitely seems more like a prayer than just a line in like a book, you know?
yeah, cuz I mean, it is always used in the beginning of the sentence. like to
Hmm.
start the new stanza. But
Yeah, so it definitely adds to the chant.
yeah, it's not a chant because it doesn't repeat the same like reasons and examples. It
Yeah,
kind
like
of goes over different
afterwards.
things. Like one
Yeah,
talks
so
about the
I.
tree in the sky, one talks about a
Mhm.
person, and then it goes back to like
Yeah.
nature and stuff, and then back to the
So
person. So
I would argue it's more of a prayer then. And
yeah,
then our last point is uh or my last point I should say. It had a very loose like fitting form.
it
Like there
did.
was no strict there was no strict rhyme or meter. I know we also covered this as well a
Yeah,
little earlier. But like the matching of the themes, like it's formless and then I don't know what's a good word.
yeah,
Like it shows its omnipresent divinity in a way. I kind of just like how like the loose forming poems just make it so you can represent the topic or the topic they're presenting, I should say,
yeah.
more right in front of you.
And something cool with this loose fitting like theme, it's kind of leaves room for curiosity because it's not really focusing on
Oh
God.
yeah.
Like I mean, it kind of is, but you could
Hmm.
argue that there's different arguments you can make that it's not about God. It's about how you think of yourself, or how
Hmm.
you need to start caring about people. You need to start people caring about the people who sits alone, and even you need to be there for people when they're in the storm and be that peace. You know, it's kind of like
Yeah.
it leaves room for people to be curious and think about what does this
Mhm.
poem truly mean and what was the author trying to get at here.
Yeah, I love that we keep referring to that line because it's very strong. It's
Yeah,
just it's very strong. But overall, I gotta say, yeah, our like the analysis of just like the poetic devices and how they like all like flash and function. They accommodate each other very well. And continuing on with that like loose form like fitting, it just and as I already said, it kind of helps reflect, which really showed me my personal insight into the poem. Mainly because like for me the line think of a man who sits alone trying to will himself into stillness where God goes belonging. It really struck me. I definitely felt those moments where you're chasing stillness or peace in a world that's noisy and complicated. Because I mean, we know the world's not all sunshine and rainbows all the time.
yeah.
But the poem really reminds me that peace isn't necessarily absence of chaos. It might
No, it's
actually
not.
be like a storm of peace. Again, that line brought up, like
Yeah,
Women says within her poem.
yeah, and also you can see in the line under a tree a darker tree, or under the tree a darker tree. This kind of relates to how people are in the world. People just look at each other and see normal people, but that we don't know what demons people are fighting, what battles are happening inside of them. We don't get to
Yeah.
see what like I don't know what you're dealing with, Jimmy. And
Hmm.
I don't know what you're dealing with, or what you don't know what I'm dealing with, and I don't even know what women's dealing with when she was creating this poem. So maybe she
Hmm.
was meaning this to try to help fight her battles, I guess. And it kind of just shows that God is the only one who knows about these issues. God knows what you're dealing with. God knows what I'm dealing with. What God even knows what women's dealing with. So
Yeah, I mean, it's that whole
yeah, it ties
like
into that bit
broken
with
apart
Riven.
thing, like
Yeah,
how God's there, even if you're broken apart, God will be there kind of thing. That's like the whole topic that we've been discussing.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
pretty much the main point of this essay is far as we go to say,
yeah,
yeah, I'm glad all that empowered you, man. It's great stuff. And I gotta say, this poem was a huge like learning curve, but it definitely added on. And there's a lot I can probably take away from this too. But we should probably recap what we covered since we covered a lot
yeah,
in a pretty short amount of time here. Such as like metaphors and just like the structure of the poem, how the speaker, it seems like they want to be a part of God and they want to be
but they
part,
don't
like
know
they
if
want
they're
to have
ready.
peace and resonance and stuff, but
Yeah, they
there's
don't.
still conflict within themselves.
Yeah, they don't think that they're good enough for God. They don't think that they're whole enough. They think they're broken.
Yeah, and that's
That
fine
word even
as
is used a lot.
yeah, and that's fine as we've already like discussed. Even if you're broken, he's there.
Yeah,
I mean, we also got like the whole genre of the poem being a sacred poem. I mean, which is pretty obvious with the whole
yeah,
religion and God and all that good stuff. And then our personal insights, as we discussed, I there's definitely a lot we can take away from this, something like this,
yeah,
especially just because it shows how faith is a two sided street, right?
yeah.
there's a lot that comes with religion, or a lot that comes with religion, such as like continuing your faith, having faith, making sure like you're set on your faith. But overall, I gotta say, it was a huge. It was great to listen to this and
Yeah,
like
no.
discuss with you. Thank you for helping me with this.
Yeah, no, thanks for letting me be a part of this.
And dude, anytime. It was a lot of fun. And then, I mean, as funny as it was, I think I gotta say my favorite line means a storm of peace, just because we refer to it a lot. One and two, it's just I think it's a really strong, like a really heavy hitter within this poem.
Yeah, I also feel that same way with the think of the man who sits alone, because nobody thinks about that one guy who's just alone. Because everyone just
Yeah,
thinks, oh, there's something wrong with him, but they don't go to see what's wrong with him, and the only person that knows about that is God. So it kind of just relates to everyone, and I can actually start to we can start to recognize that in everyday lives, and also just make sure that we can check in on those guys who are
hmm
alone and kind of feeling down. Just helps
yeah.
us
Like,
connect to our community
hey, mini lesson right there. Go to the guy who sits alone. Go ahead and talk to him, right?
because you don't know what they're dealing with.
Exactly.
But
But
yeah,
yeah,
man, it's been so good to do this with you.
anytime. And overall, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed.